Hello everyone, welcome to Brain Blitz Audios. Today, in this episode of Cbse multiple choice questions, we are going to be looking at some sample questions of science, which is for grade 10 students. So, as you know, the Cbse board exams have now been bifurcated into two. The first exam is slated to take place between the end of November or early December, and the second exam would be at the end of the academic year. So the first exam is unusual because it's made entirely out of multiple choice questions, and so therefore in this video we're going to be giving you practice for questions that can be asked from the science subject for grade 10 students. So we're going to be looking at some questions here, and we're going to be learning how to solve them effectively and in the shortest possible time. So let's look at our first question. In the reaction of iron with copper sulfate solution, which is CuSO4 plus Fe gives Cu plus FeSO4, which option in the given table correctly represents the substance that is oxidized and the reducing agent? So is it Fe and Fe, Fe and FeSO4, Cu and Fe, CuSO4 and Fe? Now, this question is a tricky question because this answer is not expected by most people. If you do know the right answer, you expect it. But if you're trying to guess, then people most likely fall into error here. So here we have the equation. We need to find out the oxidized substance and the reducing agent. So how do we do it? Well, for this particular question, the trick is to understand the two elements, the correct option here. So we need to understand the parts of the reaction, that is substance, oxidized, and reducing agent. So the crazy thing here is that substance oxidized is the same thing as reducing agent. So if you look at the definition for the reducing agent is any reactant which oxidizes itself so as to make the other reactant reduce. So in this case, oxidation means loss of electrons or gain of oxygen, and reduction here usually means gain of electrons and gain of hydrogen or loss of oxygen. So if you're looking at the substance that is oxidized, then it's the same thing as the reducing agent. So if you do not know what the definition for reducing agent is, then you're most likely going to hit an error. So it's very important to understand the terms given. So now we know that both of them are the same element, the same reactant. Then let's look at the reaction itself. So CuSO4, the SO4 ion is always has a charge of -2, so copper has a charge of +2. And on the right hand side, copper has a charge of 0 because it's an atom. On the left hand side, iron has a charge of 0 because it's an atom. And on the left hand side, it has a charge of +2 because now it is combined with SO4 2-. So as you can see, copper, which was 2+, has gone to 0, so it gained some electrons. So that means it is not the substance that's oxidized, it's the substance that is reduced. On the other hand, we have iron, which was in its native state with an oxidation state of 0, and now in FeSO4, iron has a charge of +2. So as you can see, some electrons have been lost from iron, so this is the oxidized substance. And since iron is the oxidized substance, it has to be the reducing agent. That means among the four options, option A, iron and iron, is the correct answer. Now, let's look at another question. The chemical reaction between copper and oxygen can be categorized as displacement reaction, decomposition reaction, combination reaction, double displacement reaction. So before we move on to the question, so for this particular question, if you know the reaction between copper and oxygen, then you'll hit the right answer really fast. So let's try out the longer route, looking at each of the options and then looking at the equation. So what is a displacement reaction? So in a displacement reaction, element is displaced by another from its salt solution. Like for example, CuSO4 plus Fe gives FeSO4 plus Cu. That is a displacement reaction. A decomposition reaction is where one compound is dissociated into two or more constituents. In a combination reaction, two or more reactants form one single product. And in a double displacement reaction, exchange of ions takes place. So the ions, the positive ions move to a different negative ion than they were in when they were reactants. So BaSO4 plus, barium chloride plus sodium sulfate gives sodium chloride plus barium sulfate. So that's how. So now we need to find out what is the chemical reaction between copper and oxygen. So we know that oxygen exists as O2, copper exists as Cu, and the formation and the product form is copper oxide. So since you have O2, you need to give a 2 to Cu and a 2 to CuO in order to balance the equation. So as you can see, copper and oxygen combine together to form copper oxide. So therefore, option C, combination reaction, is the correct answer. So if you knew the reaction, then you can see that two or more reactants are combining to form a single product. Therefore, option C, combination reaction, is the correct option. Now, let's look at this question. Which of the given options correctly represents the parent acid and parent base of calcium carbonate? Is it HCl-NaOH, H2CO3-CaOH twice, H3PO3-CaSO4, H2SO4-CaSO4? So, how do we solve this question? Well, first let's find out what's calcium carbonate. Calcium carbonate has the chemical formula CaCO3. So, we need to find out which of these acids and bases react together to form CaCO3. So if you look at option A, it says HCl plus NaOH. So this is a double displacement reaction and neutralization, so you get NaCl plus H2O. So the salt formed here is sodium chloride and not calcium carbonate. Option A is incorrect. What about option D, H2SO4 plus CaSO4? Here, as you can see, both of them have the same ion, so therefore there is no reaction taking place. So option D is also incorrect. What about option C, H3PO3 plus CaSO4? Well, you know that calcium has +2 and, well, SO4 has 2-, so therefore the product that we get is Ca3PO3 twice, because PO3 has a charge of -3, so -3 times 2 gives you -6, 2 times 3 gives you +6, so therefore Ca3PO3 twice is the salt that we get and not CaCO3, so option C is incorrect. The correct option here is option B, H2CO3 and CaOH twice. So if you were to just look at the calcium carbonate, you can see that it's calcium and a carbonate ion. So the parent acid must have the carbonate ion, so H2CO3 is the only option given here. So therefore option B would be the correct option. Now, let's look at this question. How will you protect yourself from the heat generated while diluting a concentrated acid? A, by adding acid to water with constant stirring, B, by adding water to acid with constant stirring, C, by adding water to acid followed by base, D, by adding base to acid with constant stirring. Now, the question here is to dilute a concentrated acid. So our end product is dilute acid. Now, if you look at options C and D, it says adding water to acid followed by base and adding base to acid. So whenever you add a base to acid, neutralization takes place. So here, the compound formed is a salt and it's not a dilute acid, so therefore options C and D are incorrect. So now we have two options remaining: acid to water, water to acid. Now, if you've read your lab manuals correctly, you would know that adding water to acid results in splashes. So when you add water to acid, the heat generated can cause the water to froth and bubble up, and that can lead to splashes on the end user. So therefore, you should never add water to acid with a constant stirring. So option B is incorrect. The correct option here is option A. You should always add the concentrated acid to water, and you should do that with constant stirring in order to protect yourself from the heat generated by diluting a concentrated acid. So option A is the correct option. Now we have reached the final question of this episode. Why is it important to balance a skeletal chemical equation? So let's look at what happens in a balanced equation. So when you balance an equation, the end result will be the same number of a similar atom on both sides. So for example, you have 2Cu plus O2 gives you 2CuO. So in this case, there are two oxygen atoms on the left-hand side and two oxygen atoms on the right-hand side. So there are same number of atoms on both sides, which means that the atoms would exhibit the same mass. So O2 will have the same mass as 2 times O. So as you can see, both the left-hand side and right-hand side have the same mass. This inevitably leads us to the law of conservation of mass. It means that mass cannot be created or destroyed, which means that the left-hand side and the right-hand side of a reaction will have the same amount of mass. Now, that means that option C would be the correct option. Option D says conservation of momentum. It means that the initial momentum will be equal to the final momentum. Here we're talking about mass when it comes to balanced equation. So D is incorrect. To verify the law of constant proportion, what does the law of constant proportion state? It states that any compound which is found in nature, irrespective of its source, will have the same chemical composition. For example, tap water, seawater, and ice, all of these have the basic proportion H2O. So hydrogen and oxygen are combined in the ratio 2:1, and that is constant irrespective of their source. So B is incorrect. And also A is incorrect because this is related to the conservation of energy. It means that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be transferred from one form to another. So the correct option here is option C, to verify the law of conservation of mass, because in a balanced equation you have the same number of atoms on both sides. That means you have the same mass of that particular atom, so therefore the conservation of mass is achieved when we balance a skeletal equation. So that concludes this episode of Brain Blitz Audios as well as Cbse MCQs. We hope you found this episode interesting. For more of our useful and interesting content, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, which is Brain Blitz Audios. If you want to access our videos on Cbse MCQs, you can hit the playlists link that's present in the description box below. Also, if you want to get the latest updates from our channel, then please don't forget to hit the notifications icon. Again, that's present below the video. So until the next webisode, take care, stay safe, Bye-bye for now.